Blueface'S entire circle just got medically exposed, Chrisean Rock accused of blinding her own newborn, Jaidyn Alexis caught with matching lesions, and CPS is already in the building. Alright, this is the tape they didn't want the internet to press play on. And the second you unpack what's actually inside it, you're going to understand why every camera in this circle suddenly went dark at the same exact time. Before we walk into this, because I need every single person watching to hear this the whole way through, hit that like button right now. One tap is your entry ticket. Double tap it, and you just move this breakdown to the top of somebody else's feed who needs to see the receipts before the next round of damage control videos hits. Understand something, this is not a gossip story. This is a medical file that fell out of a purse on Instagram Live, and once you see what Chrisean Rock's own blood sister Tron laid on the floor, you are not going to be able to unsee it. Now, look, I put this together carefully. This is not going to be a screaming match. I'm going to walk you through the timeline exactly the way a nurse in a delivery room would walk you through a chart. Because the moment you look at what happened to baby Junior on July 17th, 2026, one thing becomes obvious. This was not carelessness. This was a decision. A documented, witnessed, on-the-record decision. And it is a decision that a small army of medical professionals begged Chrisean Rock not to make. Here is what the public was told. Here is what actually happened. And here is why the state of California is now sitting in a case file with her name on the top of it. The story Chrisean Rock's team pushed to the timeline was clean, sweet, marketable, a natural birth, a proud mother, a healthy baby boy named Chrisean Malone Jr. cute post, filtered lighting, a caption about strength. The story her sister Tron went live and detonated is something else entirely. Because according to Tron, and Tron was in that hospital room, Chrisean Rock walked into labor already carrying an active, aggressive chlamydia flare-up. Not dormant. Not managed. Active. Visible on examination. Bacterial. Contagious. Sitting in the exact anatomical corridor the baby was about to be pushed through. And when the attending doctors saw that flare-up, they did not whisper. They did not suggest. They ordered, I want to be very precise with my language here, they ordered an immediate C-section. That is not a bedside recommendation. That is a protocol. In every accredited hospital on this continent, an active chlamydia infection at the moment of labor triggers the same response. Bypass the birth canal, deliver surgically, protect the newborn. Because a baby that passes through an infected canal is not just at risk of a little irritation. That baby is at risk of neonatal conjunctivitis, chlamydial pneumonia, corneal ulceration, and, I want people to sit with this word, blindness. Permanent, irreversible blindness. That is the price tag the medical staff put on the table. And Chrisean Rock, according to her own sister, looked at that price tag, looked at the tattoo on her stomach, looked at the postpartum scar she didn't want, and said no. Let me repeat that, because I need it to land. A mother, in labor, was informed by her own medical team that if she pushed her son through the corridor her body was currently hosting an active bacterial infection in, that child could come out of the delivery room with irreversible eye damage. And the answer, from Chrisean Rock, according to a witness who shares her last name and shares her blood, was that a stomach tattoo mattered more than that risk. That is not a rumor whispered in a group chat. That is a family member breaking a silence she had been holding for months because a domestic argument over unpaid babysitting boiled over and police kicked in a door. When the police kick in the door of the person watching the baby, the story does not stay inside the family anymore. The story becomes public record. And once it is public record, every other silence in this circle starts cracking too. Let me play you the exact moment Tron dropped the hammer on live. This is not my paraphrase. These are her words on camera on the record. Why didn't your mother instincts kick in day one when you gave birth? Why? 'Cause I was there. It didn't kick in. When the nurses came in and told you, can they talk to you about yourself? You no, just go ahead and put it out there. And they said you had chlamydia. Your mother instincts didn't kick in. They said we had to do a C-section. Guess what? You refused. You didn't want to mess up your little tattoo, or you didn't want to get cut, right? Where was your mother instinct then? 'Cause you sent that baby through that infected canal, right? You did. Read that one more time. Sit with it. That is not a rumor. That is a blood relative, under her own name, on her own account, telling the entire internet that Chrisean Rock chose stomach ink over her son's eyesight. And the medical timeline that followed that decision reads like an indictment, not a coincidence. Because here is what most people scrolling past this story do not understand about chlamydial transmission from mother to newborn. It does not require a dramatic complication. It does not require an unusually long labor. It does not require anything unusual at all. A single unprotected pass through an actively infected canal is enough. The bacteria colonize the conjunctiva of the eye within days. Symptoms appear between 5 and 14 days after birth. And the window for medical intervention, the window where oral antibiotics can shut down the infection before it scars the cornea, is narrow, and it closes quietly. There is no dramatic warning. There is only a slowly worsening discharge, a slowly worsening swelling, and a parent who either recognizes what they are looking at or does not. And the person we are all being asked to trust with that recognition, in this specific case, is a woman who was told the diagnosis in advance, was offered the surgical bypass in advance, and refused. That is the recognition problem. That is why Tron went live. That is why CPS is now in the file. Now here is where the story cracks open into something much bigger than one delivery room. Because the infection didn't start with Chrisean Rock. The infection has a source, and the source has a name, and that name has a mugshot, a prison release date, and a face that recently showed up on camera looking, I'm going to be very clinical about this, looking exactly the way an active viral outbreak looks. Blueface got out. That's step 1. Within days of Blueface walking back into public life, the high-definition close-ups started rolling in, and what people saw on his mouth was not chapped lips. It was not razor burn. It was not, as Blueface tried to spin it, keloids, because keloids are dense fibrous scar tissue, and what was on Blueface's face was open, weeping, fluid-filled ulceration clustered directly along the vermilion border of the lips. That is a textbook presentation. That is HSV-1 and possibly HSV-2 in active shed phase. And active shed phase, for anyone who hasn't sat through a virology lecture recently, is the exact window in which the viral load is at its absolute peak, and any skin-to-skin contact, any kiss, any shared drink, any moment of intimacy, is a guaranteed transmission event. Blueface tried to talk his way out of it. He posted, he joked, he called it a skin condition. But biology does not care about captions. And biology sent the receipt within the same news cycle. Because Jaidyn Alexis, his second baby mama, the mother of his other child, the woman who months earlier had been publicly dragging Chrisean Rock for her medical negligence. Jaidyn Alexis showed up in photograph after photograph with the same clustered, weeping lesions on the same anatomical zone. Same borders. Same discharge. Same timing. The incubation window from exposure to visible outbreak for herpes simplex is between 2 and 12 days, and the gap between Blueface's public reappearance and Jaidyn's first flare-up photograph lines up inside that window with almost surgical precision. And here is the part that made the medical community online lose its composure. Because a few posts later, Blueface uploaded a plate of food. Just a plate. Just his hands. And on his hands, on the palms, on the fingers, in a specific hyperpigmented, ulcerated distribution, were the exact lesions that dermatology textbooks flag as the copper-penny palmar rash of secondary syphilis. Palms and soles. That is not a random rash. That is a systemic bacterial infection announcing itself to anyone in the room with a medical degree. Now stop. Sit up. Because this is where the story stops being about a rapper's love life and starts being about a public health event. You have Blueface allegedly carrying at minimum a herpes strain and potentially secondary syphilis. You have Jaidyn Alexis presenting with matching herpes symptomatology days after intimate contact. You have Chrisean Rock, who is married to Blueface, giving birth with an active chlamydia flare and refusing surgical intervention. You have a newborn, Chrisean Jr., whose earliest public footage shows exactly the ocular discharge, swelling, and redness that neonatal chlamydia produces. And you have Nivea, Blueface's current pregnant girlfriend, receiving frantic direct messages from his outside partners begging her to get tested before she delivers her own child. This is not a love triangle. This is a transmission chain. And Blueface's response to being warned about it live on stream might be the most medically reckless thing a public figure has said on camera this decade. When's the last time you went to the doctor? Y'all do know I go to the doctor, right? This man don't have nothing. Yeah, she goes to the doctor for both of us. Like when she go in and she come back and say it's clear, that means I'm good. I want people to understand exactly what he just said. Blueface just told his entire audience that his pregnant girlfriend getting a clean lab result is his lab result. That is not how infectious disease works. That is not how testing works. That is not how anything in a biology textbook works. A person can be an asymptomatic carrier, shedding pathogens between multiple partners for months, while every one of those partners tests differently, symptoms differently, and infects differently. That single quote, "She goes to the doctor for both of us," is going to be used in epidemiology classrooms. I promise you. Now, some of you are already typing in the comments. This is gossip. This is speculation. This is not confirmed. I hear you. Let me grant you that specific ground, because I want to be fair. Blueface has not, at the time of this recording, produced a public medical document. Nobody in this circle has released official diagnostic paperwork. That's true. That's the one piece of concrete ground the defenders can stand on. But, and this is where the concession turns, that is exactly why what we already have on the record is so damning. Because we are not working from anonymous rumors. We are working from Tron, Chrisean Rock's biological sister, testifying under her own face that a chlamydia diagnosis was made in the hospital and a C-section was refused. We are working from Jaidyn Alexis on video, confirming that the entire inner circle knew Chrisean was actively infected during delivery. We are working from photographic evidence of matching lesions on two people who had just re-established intimate contact. We are working from CPS filings that Tron says she personally sat down to answer for. And we are working from Chrisean, the drag queen who broke the internet by releasing timestamped direct messages, location tags, and video evidence of Blueface sliding into her DMs to arrange private encounters. That last piece is the one people keep skipping. Chrisean didn't leak a screenshot. She leaked a folder. Metadata, timestamps, geotags, the whole chain. And it lines up with the same window in which Blueface's dermatological symptoms began appearing on camera. It also lines up with a very specific set of statements Blueface himself made on live stream about his personal intimate preferences, statements that broadened the transmission surface far beyond the two baby mamas the public was tracking. I'll play his exact words. Because I don't want to characterize them. I want you to hear them. I want a lubricant, baby. I just want to buy a Wi-Fi. What if I want to go in the back? You with it, huh? That is his voice. That is his phrasing. And when you overlay that phrasing on top of Chrisean's receipts, on top of the palm lesions, on top of the oral lesions, on top of Chrisean Rock's own on-record accusation that she found explicit male-on-male content in his device search history, which, by the way, is the exact reason she is publicly given for covering up the tattoo of his face on her neck, the map starts drawing itself. I am not here to speculate about anyone's private preferences. I want to be extremely clear about that. What I am here to do is trace a documented pathogen chain through documented statements made by the people inside that chain. And every arrow on that map points at one man, standing in the middle of a network of unvetted contact, refusing to get tested, and telling his pregnant girlfriend that her lab result is his lab result. Now let's talk about the child. Because the child is what turned this from a scandal into a case file. Chrisean Jr.'s earliest public appearances, I am talking days-old footage, show consistent ocular symptoms. Persistent discharge. Puffiness. Redness that does not resolve. These are not newborn eyes adjusting to light. Pediatricians who watched that footage clocked it in the comment sections in real time. Neonatal chlamydial conjunctivitis presents exactly like that. And left unmanaged, it does not stay in the eye. It scars the cornea. It attacks the tear ducts. And in the worst-case pathway, it takes the sight. Tron's live wasn't just an angry sister airing dirty laundry. It was, functionally, a whistleblower event. The moment she said the word chlamydia and paired it with refused the C-section, she triggered exactly the reporting pathway that mandated reporters are required to walk. Child Protective Services opened a file. Tron confirmed on camera that she personally had to answer questions from caseworkers to clear her own name in the fallout. That is not internet drama. That is a state agency involving itself in the care of a newborn. And here is where I have to name something that most creators are dancing around. Chrisean Rock is not an anonymous mother. She is a public figure with tens of millions of followers, a platform, a documentary series, and a paper trail of publicly documented decisions about her own body and her own child. Every one of those decisions is now a data point in a CPS timeline. Every live stream, every clip, every tattoo cover-up post, every argument with her sister, it is all now evidence that a caseworker can pull. That is the reality. Not the version her PR team is going to post tomorrow. The reality. Meanwhile, Jaidyn Alexis, who just months ago was the loudest voice publicly criticizing Chrisean for the exact same medical negligence she is now, according to photographic evidence, staring down herself, is trapped in the same cycle. That is not karma. That is not the internet being cruel. That is what happens when a viral pathogen is allowed to move freely through a closed social network whose central node refuses to see a doctor. It reaches everyone. It doesn't discriminate between the woman who is warning about it and the woman who is denying it. Biology is not a moral system. Biology is a transmission graph. And the last person standing in that graph right now is Nivea. Pregnant. Being warned by strangers in her DMs. Being told by her partner that his health is downstream of her lab work. Carrying a child inside the same anatomical corridor that Chrisean Rock's team just spent a full news cycle telling the world about. So, let me ask you the question I want you to sit with before you scroll to the comments. Do you believe Nivea's baby is safe? Do you believe the state should have already stepped in for Chrisean Jr.? And do you believe, honestly, that Blueface should be allowed anywhere near a maternity ward, given what he just said on stream about how testing works in his household? Because here is where I have to close the loop I opened at the top of this video. I told you at the beginning that this wasn't gossip, that it was a medical file, that the receipts were already in the room. And now you have seen them. You have heard Tron on camera saying the word chlamydia. You have heard Jaidyn Alexis confirming the inner circle knew. You have heard Blueface, in his own voice, telling the internet that his girlfriend is his doctor. You have seen the lesions. You have seen the palms. You have seen the baby's eyes. You have seen Chrisean's folder. You have seen the covered-up tattoo. The cover story is dead. The alibi is dead. What's left is a paper trail, and paper trails don't unfollow you when the news cycle moves on. And I want to be very clear with the audience that has been rolling with this channel for a while, because I know some of you are watching this and thinking, this is heavier than the usual coverage. Yes, it is. It is heavier because the stakes are heavier. When the subject of a story is an adult celebrity making adult decisions, we can trade jokes about it, we can meme it, we can move on. When the subject of a story is a newborn who has no voice in the room, who cannot testify, who cannot post, who cannot subscribe, who cannot correct the record, then the tone has to change. Junior did not sign up for any of this. Junior did not consent to a delivery room decision. Junior did not consent to being the visible outcome of a medical dispute between a mother and her doctors. Junior did not consent to being photographed for content while an infection was potentially working its way across his eyes. That is why the language in this video is careful. That is why I am not making jokes. Because Junior is the only person in this entire story with clean hands, and he is also the only person in this entire story who cannot defend himself. That should matter to us. If it does not matter to us, we have become exactly the audience these creators are afraid of. I want to hear from you now, because this is the moment the algorithm actually listens. When you watched Tron's live, did you believe her? When you saw the lesions on Blueface's mouth and then on Jaidyn Alexis's mouth, did that timeline convince you? Do you think Chrisean Rock should lose custody, or do you think this is going to get buried in a settlement the way these stories always do? And the biggest question, the one I really want your honest answer on, is baby Junior going to be okay? Because everything I'm reading tells me the window on that question is closing faster than anybody in that circle wants to admit. Drop your read in the comments. Not a joke, not a meme, your actual read. Because the next update on this story is going to hit fast, and I want to know who is paying attention before it did. If you want to be here when the next document drops, and something is going to drop, because Tron already promised more, and Chrisean is not the type of witness who releases only one folder, then hit subscribe right now and turn the notification bell on. Because the next video on this channel is the piece I have been building for 2 weeks, the full financial trail underneath the circle, the label money, the management money, and the very specific reason nobody in Blueface'S team has stepped in to force him into a clinic. That video answers the one question this one couldn't touch. Watch for it. It is coming this week. Thank you for staying to the end. Thank you for treating this like the medical file it is, not the meme it will get reduced to on other channels. Keep your eyes open, keep your comments sharp, and I will see you the second the next receipt drops.